And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
All right, everybody. Eric Dim, your most complained cop, NYPD. This is New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast with your 265 Police Live series. Along with me is the founder and the co-host of the podcast, John McCarroll, retired lieutenant. We got a good episode for you. Recently, there was a controversial incident that happened in New York City involving an NYPD cop that was working alone. He was off duty in plain clothes. Now, I think it's important to note that's been different perspective and analysis in this particular incident. John and I will break it down for you. The title of this podcast is Why No Cop Should Work Alone. So, John, let's get right into it and explain why we titled that in this specific incident.
Yeah, so the video that Eric's talking about comes out of the 79th Precinct, do or die Bed-Stuy, home of Biggie Smalls, for those of you that don't know. And it was a Captain Muniz. I believe he was the executive officer. He's in an unmarked car, from what we're told, on his way to work. And he spots a suspicious vehicle, runs the plate of the vehicle, and the plates don't match the vehicle. So he automatically assumes grand larceny auto, right? Felony car stop. Now, we don't catch the whole part of the car being pulled over, so we don't know what happens, but we will be able to tell by the video that he had called for help already, that he had called for another vehicle, because obviously in New York City, we don't want to stop anyone alone. We're consistently calling for help. I mean, we work together always. You always work with another partner in New York City. And we know in other states that's not always the case. But we believe regardless where you work, police work should be a team sport. Rarely you should be with somebody for your safety. And you're gonna see it highlighted here on why, a lot of different reasons.
With that being said, like John said here, despite which police department you work for, which area of the country, there are some rural areas, suburban, and of course, metropolis. And yes, in a metropolis area like New York City, you do need more cops than you do in a rural area. However, I've said this throughout my entire career, and I'll say it again. I don't think any cop should work alone ever. And the reason why is this. So I've said this on my first interview with John. Before we started this podcast together, John actually conducted an interview with myself, and I told my story about being an anti-crime sergeant, special operations lieutenant, and basically my insight on doing plainclothes work. But what I'd like to start with this. The average person, armchair critics, those that suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect when they watch police incidents, sometimes they'll say, why is there more than one cop with one potential subject? And here's why. When a cop is involved in an encounter making an arrest, it's not one person or one subject or one person of interest, but it's one entire incident. So, John, let's get into it. Let's explain why it's not one person, why it's one incident, and exactly what we mean by that.
So one incident, right? You're rolling up, you see something, you see a car, suspicious, stolen, plates don't match, right? Now, where are you, right? How many people are around you? Is there traffic coming at you? Is there foot traffic coming at you? What are the noises in the background? How many people are in that vehicle? The buildings around you. Could there be people on the roof? Could there be people in the windows? Are there people in the store? Is anything else happening on the street at that moment in time while you're conducting that car stop? Or are you conducting that car stop in front of a group of people? Is it an environment that's hostile to police officers? Is it an environment that's usually not friendly to be in for a cop? So one scenario is the entire incident, taking it into account. You're not just going to be zeroed in on the person that you have stopped, because if you do, you're tunnel visioned and you're at an extreme disadvantage should someone come up behind you, should someone come to strike you. People, especially in New York City, people come up and ask you a question and hey, do you know where it might be harmless, they might not be harmless, you don't know, but you need you need to have eyes everywhere, all over you, not even just behind you, all over you at every moment of the time while you're conducting a felony car stop and trying not to get shot in your face that day.
Well, like John said here, absolutely. That's the point that I want to get into. So when you're involved in an arrest encounter, this is not a mutual fight. We're not combatants. It's not a UFC match. What this is a mission to make an arrest or to stop some type of violence. But in this particular case that we're talking about, is to make an arrest. And for some, when they critique these videos and they watch it without understanding the inner linings of police work, they might think one cop should be suffice. But as John said, you need more than one set of eyes. You need eyes in the back of your head. Now, sometimes I've heard people say, well, why do you have 3 cops for a particular incident or 8 cops? Sometimes we might even see as many as 20. And I would argue, yes, sometimes you do need 20 cops to make an arrest of one potential subject. Why? Because it's not one person. It's one entire incident. So how I look at this, and I used to explain to my cops, and I used to explain to the public when we would have conversations, because conversations break barriers. It may take 10 sets of eyes and 20 sets of hands to make an arrest. So I don't look at it as, well, we have 3 cops and 1 subject. I look at how many sets of eyes and how many sets of hands do we need to make this arrest? Because in a particular arrest, especially in Metropolis, to make an arrest safely without causing any injury to that potential subject, that may be what it takes. I may need 2 cops to shut down traffic to the north, 2 cops to shut down traffic to the south, 2 cops to watch Granny that's above. Maybe this potential adversary is throwing what we call airmail. That means they're throwing stuff outside the window. We may need cops to address the onlookers. We may need cops to address a potential hostile crowd. And exactly as John said, sometimes people are not mindful and they're completely oblivious and they're in their own world and they attempt to engage cops into a conversation while they're making an arrest. So here you have to divert your attention. So there's only so many sets of eyes that you have. So an arrest situation, it could take 20 cops to arrest one adversary.
If you had to go out now to arrest one person is known to carry firearms, violent person, what would be the ideal amount of police officers you would like in the car with you that night to go out?
That's a great question. So ideally, it was always best to have 3 people in the car. If I could have 4, that would be the best. But when I was a special operations lieutenant and an anti-crime sergeant, I used to teach my cops, we used to have the driver, the passenger, and then the rear passenger. And the rear passenger would sit on the same side as the driver. Because if I have a potential adversary on the driver's side, the driver doesn't have to abandon the car. The rear passenger gets out. If the adversary is on the passenger side, the passenger gets out. So you work as a team. So ideally, a minimum of 3, including the driver. Absolutely. And anybody that's anti-crime or even CRT, because it's quasi-anti-crime, is watching this and it absolutely agrees with me.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I was going to say. 3 is the ideal situation. You could effectively make a car stop with multiple occupants with 3 without necessarily having to call another car over. I felt that was always the most effective car that was out there that night. 100%. So you nailed that. But of course you'd like to have 4, but I mean, now it's just too many people. It's like, but the more the merrier, basically. So let's get into this video. Like I said, you're going to see that the captain's conducting a felony car stop. You see that he has the door of the vehicle open. He has his hand on the perpetrator. He has his firearm pointed at the perpetrator. In my head, I see that this person was not following orders immediately upon that vehicle stop. We're not going to see that on the video. This is just what I'm inferring from what I see in the video, that individual is attempting to get out of the car or not complying with the orders that the captain was giving him immediately upon pulling him over. So that's how I view this. Eric, what do you see with the captain pointing his gun at him, the door's open, and he has a hand on the perpetrator, how the video starts? Like, what do you think also could have happened, or, prior to this video coming in?
So right away, no, not to toot our own horns, but it's just fact because we have the experience. I do believe that we see things that others don't see. We say it all the time. So without any context, we were able to identify certain behavioral indicators that actually reflected true once some information started to flow. And we had controversial debates in regards to this incident before we had additional information to actually verify some of the subtleties that were observed in this particular video. Tremel, his last name's Thompson, right? Tremel Thompson?
Thompson, yeah.
All right, so Tremel Thompson from Progressive Action TV just had John on his show recently. It was a great conversation because, as I always say, opposition meets opportunity. So immediately Tremel was very critical of this particular incident, and rightfully so. He has a right to do that. And that's why it's great. The communication breaks barriers, because John and I immediately debated his perspective. We do believe that his perspective is wrong. He's entitled to his perspective, but here's why. So immediately he felt the cop was egregious and out of control. And what we see is that the cop is by himself, obviously in a volatile situation, and ultimately what the viewers feel is egregious is that the cop struck the adversary with the pistol, ultimately referring it as a pistol whip. Now, I do not see this as your typical pistol whip that most people think of when someone grabs the barrel and hits someone over the head. But why was this a pistol whip in this particular situation? Because he's working alone. So his dominant hand, which is meant to hold and grasp his firearm, is occupied with the firearm. The non-dominant hand is being used to try to stop the subject, give him directions, and maintain control. He's already inside the car. So at this point, what I can see is that he's already engaged a potential perpetrator. He's already tried to provide some commands. And the fact that he's inside the car, this is what people don't understand about subtleties. The fact that he's inside the car immediately was indicative to me that the perpetrator, who's the motorist, was non-compliant, that he had to get himself inside the car to try to stop it. And you can see the subtle movements in the passive resistance that others did not see. You can see the motorist is trying to take off. He's trying to put his foot to the gas. You can see he's trying to move the wheel. He's non-compliant, but in a passive way. And so the fact that the cop was halfway inside the car was very indicative that he's already been met with resistance. So that's what I see so far. That's without any other additional information. And we do hear the sirens also, which was indicative that he's already called for backup. So, which means this was going to lead to an arrest. So without any additional information, that's what we immediately see at this point. And I'm sure, John, you could draw onto this more. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, and just pay attention during the video. You're going to see that, like exactly what Eric said. You're also going to see him attempt to reverse that car. You're going to see the car move a little bit, and you're going to hear an engine. Boom! He's trying to back away as the doors open. The door of the driver door is open, and the captain's in that door. So if the perpetrator is successful, throws that car in reverse and punches the gas, the captain's done for, because that door is going to drag him and he's getting run over. There's only one way out, and it's over that captain. So his life he's in a very dangerous situation. His life is in being threatened, where he could easily be ran over, but he could also easily be shot by the perpetrator again, because the perpetrator is not compliant. So he doesn't know what's in that vehicle. He just knows, I'm doing a felony car stop. This plate doesn't match. More than likely, this is a stolen vehicle. So that's where we're at. Let's get right into it. Let's play the video.
Hey! Yo, get out! Yo, chill! Recording.
I am.
Yo, bro.
Hey! Bro! No! Don't do it! Don't do it! Stop! 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 Bro! Bro! Please don't! Stop! Stop! Look at me! Look at me! Please! Oh my God! All right! Bro. All right. Relax.
He's good now.
Relax.
He's good now. Yeah.
Please stop.
All right, so let's start talking about the initial encounter. Exactly what I said. The fact that he's halfway inside the car, and when I say him, I'm referring to the captain in plain clothes. He's halfway inside the car because we could see, and I hope that the viewers, even those that are anti-police, just take a look at this and see how the perpetrator, and I say perpetrator because he's under arrest, who's also the motorist, is not compliant. You can clearly see that he's trying to move that car in drive or reverse, complete non-compliant. So this also reflects on why I always say not to work alone. So unfortunately, it's not a perfect world, and sometimes you have to work alone for a short period of time until backup arrives, which happened here. But in the police world, seconds count, and seconds are an eternity. So we can see how problematic it is to be by yourself because you only have two hands. One hand is occupied with that firearm. One hand is occupied trying to control the adversary and trying to control the wheel. So what's so problematic also is his back is turned to the crowd. He's by himself. So it's a scary moment. Not only that, we talk about being in Metropolis. He's at the intersection. In most cases, this looks like a transient area in Brooklyn. It's not in housing, right? It's a transient area, it's a residential area, but he's at the intersection. The intersection is a busy area. You have to worry about other cars. You can see the pedestrians walking. He has a lot of elements to worry about. And also, he's in plainclothes. And when you're in plainclothes, it's much harder to retract and holster your firearm than it is when you're in uniform where you have that outside holster. So for all my cops that are watching this, NYPD or anywhere in the country, please, I've always recommended this to my cops, and I did it myself. Take out all your ammunition, and you should practice. God forbid you're in this situation in plain clothes, off duty, and you're in a situation that you have to take action, that you actually have practiced taking your firearm when it's out and putting it back in your holster, because it's much different. It's a different action than when you're putting that holster. When you put that gun in a holster when you're in uniform, it's much different. And not only that, when you're in plain clothes, most likely, depending on the clothes that you're wearing, your holster's probably going to move in different places. So you have to practice how you're going to put that firearm back. But what I also see here, and this is why immediately when I heard from Trammell and other people that were making their observations, they said that he was egregious and out of control. And what I see here is that the captain is mission-oriented. He's not emotionally invested. I think he's acted as a complete professional. Is he aggressive? Yes, but he's aggressive with control. And that is necessary in a volatile situation, just as you see on this video.
Yeah, I mean, when you see it, originally you look at it, you like, oh my God, that captain just cracked him with a gun and then continued to kick him. But that's somebody with an untrained eye saying that. Now think about it from our standpoint. I'm pointing a gun at an individual. I'm telling him not to move, and he's attempting to put the car in drive. The car at this point is stolen, whether it's stolen or not. In my head, it's stolen. This guy's attempting to pull away, right? And if he pulls away, I'm dead, because either he's going to run me over or he's going to drag me and I'm going to die at some point when he picks up the speed. But, you know, And at the same time that's going on, people are running over to this guy. They're running over to him. Yo, cut it out, cut it out. And he has multiple people he's worried about, right? He doesn't even hear those sirens. Those sirens you heard, I guarantee he does not hear them. He only sees when the cops get there. I'll guarantee it. His adrenaline's flowing, his heart's pumping. And what do we see? We see him holding a gun at the guy, and he has his hand on the guy, and he's telling him, don't do it. And he's telling him to stay in the car, and he's trying to push him. He's trying to use all his weight to keep the guy in the car. And the guy gets out of the car and pushes the captain that has a loaded firearm to him. He pushes him. So obviously he engages the physical encounter. He engages physically on the captain. I'm slowing it down for those of you that could see right here. The captain's holding him in. He's holding him in. He's holding him in. Look, now he's trying to step out. The captain's pushing him back. No. The camera pans a little, but you see right here. You see right here. The guy pushes the captain. The captain steps back to gain control, and he strikes him. Does he strike him with the firearm? Yes, but he had no other option at that point. He had the firearm in his hand. So the captain didn't want to shoot him. And I don't believe he wanted to hit him either. But at that point, he had no choice because he was vulnerable. He had one hand holding the suspect. The suspect pushed him. He's assuming he's going to get struck. So he strikes first. He hits with his only option to hit with, which is hit back with, because obviously, like I just said, and he strikes him across the head with the firearm. And then the fight continues to ensue.
Stop right there. Can you go back to that spot? A little bit more. Okay, so for our viewers out there, look at the position of the cop. Okay, he's a captain, but for everybody out there, I don't care. He's a captain. To me, he's a cop. I think if this was an argument I used to have with people and say, oh, I'm not a cop anymore, I'm a captain, or I'm a lieutenant. No, you're a cop that leads other cops. Can you go back? So there, stop right there, if you can. So what do we see is that for those that say that this perpetrator was compliant, that's absolutely the furthest from the truth. And that's why I say subtleties. We see the subtleties that others don't. Clearly, you could see that the cop is off balance right now. You can see that he's lost his base. He's trying to hold on with his non-dominant hand. That is completely accurate. That's a natural reaction. And his dominant hand, which your firearm stays in a dominant hand, is occupied. And he has to deploy a strike to maintain his balance and not go down. And he strikes with the dominant hand. And incidental, he gets struck with a pistol. I see absolutely no problem with this. John and I even made the comparison with Nick Stephanopoulos, who is a lieutenant, who was making an arrest in a controversial incident, who wears tan pants. He struck the motorist, who's the perpetrator. It appeared he might have had the firearm in his hand or not. We did not have an issue with it because it's incidental. I don't see any malice in this captain at all. I think he's doing a fantastic job. Under the circumstances, it was almost impossible for him to react, combat this perpetrator pushing him, and put his firearm away. So he showed a complete amount of restraint. He obviously had his finger off that trigger, which shows he has firearm discipline, unlike we know from Chief Shell, who had an accidental discharge in many years. So this captain, in my opinion, did the best he could under the circumstances. So I commend him. Was he aggressive? Yes. But there's a difference between aggressive control and out of control. And that aggression was absolutely necessary. Now, you could see it because clearly, as soon as the cops arrive, here they are. They're now addressing the subject. And now the captain has an opportunity immediately. What does he do? He immediately puts the firearm away. So that shows he's aware of the situation. He's aware of himself. He's aware of the adversary. He's fully aware. I think that he absolutely showed an extreme amount of discipline. And for that, I commend him. We need more cops, and we need more men like this who should be leading the troops out there. To me, with that being said, I think he did a great job.
Oh, I think it was, I think it was a great job under the circumstances, and that's why, I say a lot, police work is a contact sport. It doesn't look pretty on camera. Now, so, Trammell said this was an aggressive cop. I've spoken to several reporters about this who still have very close ties to the New York City Police Department. And it actually, I've had it confirmed several times that the vehicle actually was stolen. The district attorney did not charge him with it. So he charged it with unregistered vehicle, mismatched plate doesn't match the vehicle. He also had zips of crack cocaine in there. So he had 2 charges of criminal possession of controlled substance, one of them with an intent to sell. So the captain's observations were more than correct by running this plate. We heard, oh, what is it? A white cop sees a black man driving a BMW X7 and he pulls him over. And oh no, and he decides to run the plate. To me, that's an egregious statement. That statement is a statement born from ignorance, because the bottom line is this: something raised that captain up and he runs the plate, and the plate isn't good, right? And then let's take it further. The car's stolen and there's drugs in the car. So his observations were very keen. So it wasn't about his color. Again, skin color just gets thrown in there basically I don't know why. And I don't know why perpetrators are being put up on a pedestal and police officers are being treated as if they're people that can't be trusted. And I'm not to say that every police officer should be trusted, but I don't know, Eric. If there's a cop pointing a gun at me and telling me not to move, regardless if I did anything or not, I'm not going to move. I'm certainly not going to try to drive my car away from him. And I'm definitely not going to push him while he's pointing his gun at me.
Well, that's a great point that you bring up, right? And also, what does that do? That reflects that at this particular perpetrator was confident that he was dealing with someone that was under control with professionalism. Because if you thought, even if you didn't steal the car, if you were the most obliging citizen on this earth, if you thought that this cop was actually going to shoot you, you would not push him and try to get out of that car while he has a firearm in his hand. So it was obvious that he knew that this cop maintained control and maintained discipline. Because if you thought that you were actually going to get shot, you're not going to make those actions. You're not going to make those movements. So this is a great opportunity. Let's just completely dissect this, right? On one side, we have the perpetrator, and on one side, we have the cop. And what do we have here? We have a complete comparison that has been displayed on social media. And the comparison is the arrest rap sheet in this particular case in comparison to the 50A CCRB record of this particular cop, along with his lawsuits that he's had in his career. So is this equitable and is this fair? In my opinion, it's absolutely ridiculous that we're actually going to compare a cop's service record, which includes his CCRBs, which in many cases are just allegations. We didn't show the outcomes of these cases, whether they're exonerated, unfounded, and lawsuits that are settled doing police work. It's a byproduct of doing police work. So I look at this 50A completely different than the layman's person in comparison to an arrest rap sheet that does not reflect all the potential crimes that could actually be charged for the DA's office, because obviously this was dropped down because it has to be evidence-based. So, John, can you reflect more on what I'm saying here?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that you could see here is that New York City feels that public safety, you need to have transparency. And for transparency, New York City style, progressive New York City style, the only form of transparency that matters is transparency against a police officer who had allegations, unsworn allegations, might I say, because there is no penalty for lying on a police officer. There's zero penalty if you get caught lying on a cop. We haven't seen anyone that got found to be lying arrested for any of this. So there's no penalty. We could go over a 10-year period. Anyone that's filed a complaint against a cop, no matter how frivolous it is, nobody's been collared for it. So I don't know that it's never happened, but it hasn't happened in a decade that I know of. So now you have the cop's service record, like Eric says, and the amount of allegations that he's had against him. We don't know if these allegations are substantiated, if they're not. What they'll throw out is this captain had 15 CCRBs. What do they throw out about the perpetrator? Absolutely nothing other than his name and the color of his skin. They're not going to put out anything about his arrest record. He actually had about 15 arrests too. And now what we don't take into account is what was he charged with? What did he ultimately end up with, right? So it's, we want to protect this guy's privacy because he could have been falsely arrested, right? Or he could have been improperly charged. We're only going to stick to what he actually was found guilty of. But why isn't it the same for the cop then? Why is a cop held? And I get a cop being held to a higher standard. I get that. But why is the cop's unproven record so noteworthy, but this guy's arrest record isn't? It has nothing to do with the incident. So if that guy's arrest record has nothing to do with the incident, and this police officer is still on the street because New York City deems that he's still a good police officer and he should be out there regardless how many complaints he has against him, why is that taken into account then during the incident if it has nothing to do with the incident? If an arrest record has nothing to do with the incident, then a CCRB record doesn't have anything to do with an incident either. But it does. For whatever reason, in New York City, it does. It doesn't in my brain. But it weighs heavily in the court of public opinion. And I don't know why, and I don't know where we lost that and how that happened.
You're exactly right. It's the court of public opinion. And unfortunately, the public opinion has been, let's address the rights of the criminal, but let's not address the employment rights of the New York City police officer or any cop in this country. And you said it. Should cops be held to a higher standard? Yes. But at this point, what is the standard? What is the standard? Because we don't know what the actual standard is. And in order to have a higher standard, we need to know what the standard is. Now, before I even go into that, I just want to debunk the keyboard warriors on social media that are trying to race bait this issue. There is absolutely no indication in this particular arrest encounter that there's anything involved that directs towards race. There's no bias in this. This is an arrest situation based on crimes that are in the presence of an active cop. That's what we have here. There's absolutely no indication of race. If the perpetrator was white or Hispanic, the outcome would be the same. Absolutely. Now, for anyone that is saying that this is race-based and that this particular perpetrator is being stopped for being black is completely missing the mark. It is not watching this video with an honest perspective. If you're watching it and making that biased opinion, that's based on emotion, that's a feeling that you have, and I believe just making that indication is biased on your own part. Now, anyone that is not in agreement, please leave a comment. Tell us what you think about this incident. Your comments are important. Everyone's perspective is important, and we should all weigh in together and be honest about this and come to an honest and transparent decision on what we believe, what we expect from our cops going further in the future. Should a cop be in a situation just as this one tomorrow, what will you expect? I expect the cop to act exactly as this cop acted, with aggression, with control, mission-oriented, emotionally detached from the situation. You could see it. John, if you could go back to the video, there's a portion of the video when the cops respond and the two cops in uniform get the perpetrator to the floor and they're about to put him in handcuffs. And I think what's so amazing is that these cops clearly are young on the job because they're mindful of this diaphragm law. Both of them are on the side of the perpetrator and their knees are on the ground because they're scared of diaphragm law. That's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down. But it's just so insane to me that have to be mindful. But watch the demeanor of this cop. He's on the floor. He's making sure his firearm is away. He's looking around. His demeanor hasn't changed. He has shown complete stoicism and professionalism. I believe his demeanor was on point. And that's when I say, without context, that I can make a determination on this video in comparison to other videos. He is not emotionally invested. He's acting as professional. And I'm sorry to the public. I hate to burst your bubble, but sometimes cops have to use violence when it's brought to them. John always says it. It's a contact sport. It sure is. John, you've been asked before. What does that mean? Let's explain to the public again. What does it mean to be a contact sport?
It's just the reality of police work. Police work's a contact sport. It doesn't look pretty on camera. It never did. It never will. Fights aren't pretty. Any type of violence that needs to be subdued isn't pretty. It doesn't look nice. It doesn't feel nice. It doesn't sound nice when you see it, when you hear it. Most people are not accustomed to that. Most people have problems when they watch it in the movies. Never mind when you actually see it in real life and your adrenaline's flowing. So, it's something that I always say, but that's not to say that police officers should be brutal and police officers should beat people or police officers should do anything like that. But during the course of your daily duties, if you're a patrol cop, if you're an anti-crime cop, if you're out there answering radio runs or proactively policing, you will encounter situations where you will have to be physical. But does that mean that I have to close fist strike someone? Maybe, maybe not. But it does mean you will be putting your hands on people and people will be putting their hands on you and people will be resisting arrest and you will have to use force to overcome that. Now, police officers are taught and trained, and from what I see overwhelmingly they do is use the minimal amount of necessary force, which we clearly see in this video. We see the captain use the minimal amount of necessary force in order to effect this arrest. Right? As he's there and he's outnumbered now, and those two other cops came and they have his hands, and while they're attempting to get his hands, I mean, you don't see him throwing punches. You just see him instructing them, get his hands. And then he says taser at one point. And then, we don't even get to the point where he gets cuffed in the video, but you see that he has the hand, like as soon as they grabbed his hands, that captain put his gun back right away. Right. So, and that is a great factor on why nobody should work alone, right? Because if he was on the other side of that car and that started to happen and he had a partner, that partner could have ran around right then at that moment in time, and they could have grabbed that individual's hands, and that captain's gun would have been back a lot sooner. So if that perpetrator tried to come out of the car at that point when there's two of them, each holding one of his hands, taking him out of the car, I mean, the other part of that incident wouldn't have happened. He wouldn't have had to strike him, right? There wouldn't have been a tussle. It wouldn't have been that dangerous situation. And then he was throwing kicks in order to keep him back, and wouldn't have had to happen. And this clearly highlights why you should never work alone, because when someone's resisting, you got a problem. And then look, the guy takes an injury. He got hit in the head with a firearm. His head's bleeding. There's three cops. He's still resisting, and they're having trouble. I don't want to knock the two cops that are there, but it does seem that they're having a very hard time getting his hands behind his back. And now there's three cops.
Well, it's very kind of you to say that, but I think that these two cops did respond with kick gloves. They appear to be very new to me, and they're being very mindful of the diaphragm law, which is completely contradictory from what we heard from the unions. We've got attacked by these unions, and I was in numerous conversations with the unions where they said not to worry about the diaphragm law. But the diaphragm law is on record. And clearly, stop right there, please. Clearly, you can see that these two cops are mindful of the diaphragm law. They both have their knees on the ground. That is not natural. Let's be honest. When you're in a situation and you're trying to keep down a large adversary down, it's natural to try to pin your knees onto their shoulders and to their hips. In order to hold someone down, you have to realign the spine. And how do you do that? Just as we always heard as the seatbelt maneuver. The reason why it's called the seatbelt maneuver, because it crosses from the shoulder to the hip. So ideally, you see him moving around. If they had a knee to a shoulder, and if this other cop had his knee on his hip, we would have much more control of this adversary. But because of the diaphragm law, and obviously these two are, look, even he's up on his, in a, like a squatting position right now, and he's not putting his knee on him. They are very mindful of the diaphragm law. They're very mindful of the George Floyd incident. These cops are more mindful of optics than actually getting the mission done. I honestly, I look at this and I say to myself, if these two cops were trying to hold down this adversary and this plainclothes captain was there, they would not be able to do it on their own. I'm confident they would have had to call for more cops. What do you say about that?
No, I agree with you 100%. There's no way that they're fighting with this guy, and there's no way they wouldn't even. I don't even believe they would have took him to the ground without the captain, because you see the captain is the one that actually gets him to the ground. He's the one that lifts his leg, and then the other officer's able to. No, the officer does he trip him? Yeah, he does trip him. Look, he brings his leg around. So he does bring his leg around on him and trip him, and the captain pulls his other leg up so that he's off balance and he falls. But I totally agree. I mean, this diaphragm law, everyone's afraid of it. The cops are afraid of it. You could tell they're timid here. Another thing that we were trained to do is to try to hyperextend his joints at this point, right? Pull his arm back to where in an uncomfortable situation to where he has to give it to you, right? Hyperextend his elbow so that it does cause pain, put your knee on him, put your elbow in him, punch him in the ribs, right? Because you're trying to open him up to get those hands. And you clearly see none of that's happening here. And, he is a big guy and he's strong. And I'm with you. If it wasn't for that captain there, they would not have been able to control this individual. And I don't think
that's why.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I just don't think they would have got him. I don't think they would have got him in cuffs without him.
No, absolutely. Listen, the captain initiated the encounter, and he also led the charge the entire way. Clearly, I'm saying it right now. If he wasn't there, these two would have. This guy would have ate their lunch. Honestly, they would have needed a lot more cops there. He did a fantastic job from start to finish. Now, with that being said, I want the public to understand this. Even with that, I still do not encourage cops to act alone. It's not a perfect world. God forbid you're in a situation, someone's shooting out the window and they're shooting at a 2-year-old or something. You might have to act immediately alone. Now, this captain is in a fortunate position, and it's a different situation. It's kind of dynamic. The average cop on their way to work in plain clothes has their firearm in them, but what they don't have is a radio and access to that particular precinct. So this captain, even though he's off duty on his way to work, he still carries a radio. So for a captain, it's a different dynamic. He's the XO of the command. He has to listen to the radio at all times. So even when he's off duty, he still has to have his mind actively engaged into the precinct. So he's on his way to work. He's listening to what's going on the radio. He has access to the cops. He has access to get backup. I don't encourage cops, if you see a car that's stolen, to take action alone. It's completely different in dynamic. So let's talk about rank with this and his position and what we're saying and explain to the public, because I'm sure a lot of people at this point are saying, well, if this was a cop, what would be the outcome? And I can understand that. But I think this is completely different. This captain is on his way to work. He has his radio. He's listening. He sees something. So at this point, it's almost like he put himself on duty, started work. It's different. It's a different dynamic. So, John, let's get into that.
Yeah, it's a totally different dynamic. But just one last thing on the incident. If you look, for those of you that could see, if you look at this picture, and for those of you that can't on audio, what you see now is you see 3 cops fighting with this individual, and their backs are to one cameraman. And what you see is they're in the middle of the street. There's a person filming behind them. They all have their back to them. And there's people filming on the other side of them that they're trying to pay attention to as well. Also, you see other people on the corner. So there's multiple factors in this scenario. You're worried about getting run over by other cars. You're worried about cars turning down that block. You're worried about numerous others in that. And shows you exactly why it's impossible to work alone, especially in a place like New York City. But even if it's not, I mean, just the dynamic of that situation is it just clearly shows why you shouldn't work alone. But yeah, I think the dynamic's a lot different because listen, he's in a police car on his way to and from work. You know, like so a normal cop isn't going to be in a police car on his way to and from work, right? They'll be in their own car driving. Is it a good tactical situation for you to get involved? Absolutely not. Was it a good tactical situation for the captain to get involved in? Again, we didn't see the initial stop, and we don't truly know why he stopped him. He could have been knowing about a criminal pattern that was going on. That car could have been wanted. He could have known that was a car they were looking for. I don't know any of that stuff on why that happened. But again, I do think something happened that that made that captain engage the way he did and get so close to the car before that other car got there. I think something happened in between there. So if a cop does this off duty, calls 911 on the phone, I stop this car, I say hands down, and it escalates to this situation, even though I don't think the captain did anything wrong. Yeah, I believe that if it was a cop or a sergeant or a lieutenant and they were in their own personal car and that happened, I'm going to say they would get suspended.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. So I've actually discussed this with some people, and some people said, well, he's leading by example. And I would say that's completely wrong in this case. So we can't say he's leading by example, because if he's leading by example, that means that you're setting the tone, and that if this happened the following day with a cop, that would be okay. I think that this is a case-by-case basis. This particular case is a lot different than the average off-duty cop. Again, he is on his way to work. He's in his command. Now if he was in a different command, that maybe that's another dynamic. But let's talk about this. He's in his own command. He has a radio in the car, right? Because it's an unmarked car. They have radios inside the car. He probably has a radio. He has a radio on his hip. He has his firearm. He's probably already called in that he's on duty. He's working. He's probably already driving around surveying the command. Now, with that being said, all those factors, I still think that he should not work alone and not act on a situation until backup arrives. However, there are exceptions. That's why I told the people that I've conversed with on social media about this case, we do not have the entire context. Let's see the investigation play out before we make a complete determination. What I'm saying is, based on the factors that happened, under the circumstances, while he took action, I believe that he acted appropriate and should be commended. Now, the particular factors that happened up to that point, we don't have the knowledge to that yet. We don't know if there was other occupants that fled inside that car, potentially shooting. We don't know if a girl was held up. These are just rhetorical things I'm saying, and we have no idea for why he took action before backup arrived. Ultimately, in a perfect world, the best thing would be for him to get on the radio, wait till backup gets there, and then all converge as a team, just as we spoke about having 3 people in the car. But the fact that he acted before the cops got there leads us to believe, John and I both believe, that there's some other factor here of why he had to act initially. And I can make that assumption because the way he acted throughout the entire arrest process was professional. I don't see anything egregious. I don't see him being out of control. I think that he maintained stoicism, professional, throughout the entire encounter. Again, that's why this has to be a case-by-case basis. And I don't see any cause to suspend him. Now, if he was going to be suspended, now we have to start looking at other cases and say, well, for instance, the most controversial incident before this was the case with Nick Stephanopoulos, who was a lieutenant acting in uniform with tan pants. But in that case, you could see he was completely emotionally invested and not displaying the same amount of professionalism. And in that case, he was modified. So if we have standards, how could this particular captain be suspended or modified when this was absolutely more professional in every facet than that encounter?
Yeah, I mean, and there are similarities to that encounter, right? They're chasing a car. The car crashes. When the car crashes, Lieutenant Stephanopoulos runs up to the perpetrator, the guy in the car. There's still another occupant, right? Very dangerous situation, right? Now the passenger comes out with his hands up, but it's a dynamic situation. So I'm not going to sit there and say that the lieutenant can't be tunnel vision, because 100% at that point, you were just racing down New York City streets, tactic that, again, I'm not fond of that because they always end in crashes like this one did. But he runs up and he runs into the car. And as he runs at the person stepping out. So I'm going to give the lieutenant the benefit of the doubt that he's still in fear for his life. He's not seeing the guy's hand, and he sees the guy coming out of the car. So he strikes him. Now, some people have said that he struck him with a firearm. And I said, and Eric said, when we did that podcast, we really had no issue with it because of the dynamic of the situation. Because essentially, he's also doing a felony car stop, and he should have his firearm out. So when you are going to strike, you're going to use your dominant hand. So if he struck him with a gun, we really had no issue with the whole encounter. You see the guy drops like a ton of bricks, and then two cops get on him and start fighting with him to get his hands. And at that point, what you see is the lieutenant is emotionally invested. And you see him go over, and as the individual's face down with two cops on top of him, he stomps on the guy's head. I mean, so that's emotionally invested. And he was modified, right? So then the standard should be for anybody involved in a physical altercation that's questionable. The standard was set. The standard should be modification. But we didn't see that. We saw a cop recently also get suspended. There was a BLM activist who actually ran a cop over. Terrible. Ran a cop over intentionally. Was high when she did it. Admitted to smoking marijuana, I believe, and drinking. Ran the cop over. And while she was on the ground handcuffed, with her hands behind her back with cops on top of her, another cop came over and walked his foot right into her head. I won't even say he kicked her, but she was completely uninjured, by the way. And that cop was suspended. In the case that we're talking about with Stephanopoulos, this person sustained a serious injury, went into a coma, was in the hospital for 2 days. Very different situation. In this situation here, this person received a laceration to the head, right? But I think what we learned here is that for Stephanopoulos' situation, it was a modification. So then that kid with the BLM activist should have been a modification or less, because it was way less egregious. And if there was any discipline towards a scenario like this, there hasn't been as of right this second. If there is, it should be way less than a modification at this point, or a modification or less, because that should be the standard. One thing I want to say about it, though, he didn't have his vest on him. Very dangerous situation. And the other thing, he doesn't have his body camera on him. Why do those two things matter? One, the vest matters for safety. It's for your own personal safety. The body camera, why does that matter? Because guess who's coming from behind to slam him for anything they can? Eric, who's going to come after him for not wearing the body camera?
CCRB. CCRB, absolutely.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Take
the police action without a body camera, right? It's an easy one. Why give it to him? He didn't do anything wrong.
Well, he's a captain, right? So has it changed? Captains do not wear body cameras, right? Or do they not?
I see captains wearing them. I don't know. I see captains wearing them. Again, at this point, I think that if you say that a cop has to wear it, I believe that everyone in the department should have to wear it.
Well, first of all, I'm 100%. I always believe in leading by example, and I as a leader, I don't expect others to do something I do not have to do. We should be by the same standard. That's why I was so proud to be a Marine, because a general in the Marine Corps wears the same uniform as a private. It's the same uniform. There's some different color, but it's the same uniform. And also a general in the Marine Corps would be proud to be called Marine, which is the same thing. That's why I never understood a captain in the police department should be proud to be referred to as a cop. You still are a cop who leads other cops. And that's what I learned in the Marines. You're a Marine that learns other Marines, that leads other Marines, even with rank. So if there's any NYPD guys out there right now, if you have some code you could hide under, I don't want you to get in trouble. But if you could leave a comment here or let John and I know, are captains and above at this point, are they required to wear body cameras? Because at this point, I'm not exactly sure. So before I make an assessment on this, I could be talking out of my ass right here. I don't think he has to wear a body camera. I know we've seen it before, but even with that said, let's say, for instance, John, what do you think about this? Let's say he's on his way to work, and should he have to carry his body camera to work? Because it's different dynamic being a captain, right? You're in an unmarked car, you have a radio, you're not at work yet, but you're on your way to work, you're in the command. If captains have to wear body cameras, do you think that he should keep the body camera at work, or it should have to be in the car with him in case he gets to a situation like this and don that body camera? I think that's something we could explore and talk. What are your thoughts on that?
I say absolutely not, unless they're going to pay him while he's driving that car. I say that I mean, just let's go on labor law. He's not working. Why is he required to carry department property, right? He's utilizing department vehicle. They could put some snippet in there. Well, while utilizing department vehicle, you need to have this or that. But I say, if that's the case, then you should be paying me. He has that department vehicle because he has to come in at any moment, right? The guy's on vacation. They take a shooting. Something bad happens, God forbid. He's got to come in, right? That's why they have those cars. He has to go to citywide meetings. He has that car. He's an executive, in the New York City Police Department. All executives should have take-home cars. I know even that they've been a little crazy with lately as well. But they should all have take-home cars at this point. And when you're driving there, I mean, anything could happen, but you're not getting paid. And if you want me to have to do this and do that, you should pay me. He should be paid that. Whatever it is, time, cash, whatever.
Brother, I love you, man, because honestly, I'm so glad you answered that way, because that's exactly what I was going to say. If you want the captain or any cop to follow that policy at all times, then you better pay for it. There's even been some talks around the country in different states about a law that they're looking to enact. That I forgot what it's called, but something like the right to ignore your boss or something like that, to where your bosses, if they text you when you're off duty or text you when you're home, do you have to respond? Because no one's getting paid for it, right? The world has changed. People are more accessible. But it goes into this also, right? He doesn't have his cuffs on because you don't carry cuffs off duty. It's a strange dynamic, but all rules are made to be broken. I understand CCRB wants body camera for every incident, but rules are made to be broken. There has to be exceptions. This is the exception. He's off duty, and then immediately when he takes action, he's on duty, and he's in his command. He's got his radar, but he doesn't have his body camera. I don't see a problem with it. You're not going to carry your body camera off duty. Do we want cops running around there with guns and body cameras off duty? Are we going to pay them 24 hours a day? That's absolutely ridiculous. So let's talk about this. Talk about this right now, because there's different ways to look at it. I do believe cops should be armed off duty. However, when you're off duty and you are armed, you are more likely to get involved into a situation. That I wholeheartedly believe in. So you have to have the discipline to understand, yes, you have your firearm on you. So for the cops that are watching this, if you ever thought to yourself, and maybe you were in a situation where you thought you should get involved in something or not, this video is a perfect training video, because this captain did a great job as best as he could. And he's quite lucky that no one attacked him from behind, because seconds count. The average fight, just think about it. Go to YouTube and you can see it. The average fight between two combatants is 7 seconds. The average fight. And we see on YouTube, you can watch fights, how much damage people sustain in 7 seconds. So you're a police officer in a volatile situation. 7 seconds is an eternity. And your dominant hand is occupied with that firearm, and how dynamic and difficult that situation becomes. So I recommend you do not get involved unless you absolutely have to. There are situations that you may have to. Someone's life is imminent danger at that point right in front of you. You may have to. But for the most part, waiting for backup until it gets there, in a perfect world, would be necessary. Now, did he have the opportunity to wait for backup? That's why I want to see the particulars of this case, and we haven't heard it yet.
Yeah, I mean, ideal situation, if you did see something that you don't necessarily need to jump out, like there's not a woman being beat up or stabbed or murdered, something along those lines. I mean, and you do see something, you see a wanted suspect, you see someone you think fits a pattern or behavior that's cognizant with that pattern, and you think, hey, this is a guy, I want to know who the hell this is, what's going on, and you're on your way into work. I mean, what I used to do is I would either call my boss, or I would call a boss who's working, or I would call the crime guys, or I would call the desk, and I would be like, yo, there's a car here. I think these are the guys. These are the guys breaking in the house. Can I get a car of it? I'm not going to stop them. I'm in my personal car. I don't want them to see what I drive, right? Because you're driving on your way to work. But I would watch and monitor and stay in phone contact in that scenario. I mean, I think that's the best scenario. And then obviously if they get there, dump your car somewhere and then come out of nowhere. So no one sees what kind of car you were driving or anything like that. They don't know your personal car, and because again, it's just a very dangerous situation. It's so dynamic. And then you're going to be judged 8 ways to Sunday, right? Or this guy's a captain, but say he wasn't a captain. Say he's a lieutenant or a sergeant. Where's your body camera? I watched a video recently. It was a CCRB meeting, and I think it was Cleveland. And it was an off-duty cop who got involved in a shooting. And one of the members of the civilian CCRB complaint review board in Cleveland said, well, I thought cops are required to have body cameras. Cops should have to have their body camera on them off duty too. I mean, crazy. I mean, and this is where, it's going, like constant judgment, just constant. Again, I think the captain did a great job. But it's a terrible situation, and it should be avoided if it could be avoided,
I gotta laugh because I remember the same thing. I saw that thing in Cleveland also, and I'm like, what the hell are these people talking about? You're expected to carry your body camera off duty. I mean, come on. This is the only profession where they actually expect you to bring all your tools home. I mean, if you're a chef, are you going to bring all your knives and all your stuff home with you? I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. Come on. Cops have to have lives too.
Have it ready to go at a moment's notice.
It's just insane. And you're not paying a cop 24 hours a day. In most cities, cops are not even being paid what they should be paid. I mean, that's been the age-old argument that, cops will never get paid enough. I've heard that question too. People have say, do you think the cops get paid enough? I don't think you could ever. There's no amount of money that you could pay the cops. Listen, the salary that they have is pretty substantial, but there's no amount of money that you really could pay a cop because they don't get paid for what they do. They get paid for what they might have to do. And in this situation, we watch this cop who is a captain, and I'm sorry, I'm going to call him a cop. He's in a situation that could have been the last day of his life. He's very fortunate that the perpetrator heard the sirens. He knew the cops were coming, and he felt that this captain was under control. Very fortunate. This situation could have been completely different. The outcome could be completely different. This could be tragic. So, for the armchair critics that are out there, I've heard, that this was egregious. He's out of control. This cop shouldn't be on the street. All we see is this 50A. Please, put your comments on here. Like and subscribe. Please tell John and I would love to have you on the podcast. We believe opposition meets opportunity. Communication breaks barriers. We treat everyone with respect. Even if your perspective is completely in opposition, we would love to talk to you. Put your comments in here. If you think that this captain acted inappropriate, please give us the solutions. Tell us how you would operate. How do you think this could have been handled differently? What other manner? Okay, we understand the argument is he should wait for backup. He should not work alone. I understand that in a perfect world. But let's talk about the obvious, the actual video. From the point he initiates contact till the handcuffs come on. What would you do differently than what this captain did? I'm sorry, than this captain did. I just got tongue-tied. Does it sound like anybody you know? Kaz Daughtry? Anyway.
I was on Newsmax today. I got tongue-tied. But I call it Kaz tied now.
Kaz is getting to us, but
Yeah.
exactly. Put your comments here. What would you do differently? And I'm open to the conversation. From the initiating contact, how would you hold your firearm? How would you control the subject? How would you deploy a strike with your firearm in your hand? How would you put that firearm back in your holster? How would you watch this crowd? Let me ask you this, John. You ready? Based on that video portion I saw when they were on the ground, you see two people in front by the intersection. There's people behind the car. How many cops do you think should be present at this scene, this particular arrest, to make this arrest? How many cops do you think, to be the most perfect arrest, how many cops do you think should be there? And tell me why.
I don't know perfect, but I'll tell you right now, just from watching this, I want at least 4 more cops there. Like at minimal, 2 to watch one side, 2 to cut off the street, 2 to cut off the street and push those people back and make sure no cars come down that way, because it looks like it's a one-way to me. If it's a 2-way, then I want 4 cars to stop the street. I want 4 cops to just stop the street. But then I want another 2 cops to deal with the crowd at least. So depending, I'd either say at least 4, but if that's a 2-way street, then I want 8. You know, because I want crowd control from every end and the street to be blocked. You know, on top of the 3 that are already there, affecting the rest. So I at a minimum 4. At a minimum 4 more cops. So at a minimum 7 cops at least to try to bare minimal control that scene. You know what I mean? To bare minimum.
I would say even more. And I would tell you, anybody who's watching this, they know what I'm talking about. Things used to do the Bronx bounce. I heard the same term in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn bounce. You need even more cops. I would need 2 or 3 cops to actually control that car. Because if there is a firearm in there, there's drugs inside that car. If you're not watching that car while that arrest is going down, it was very popular in the Bronx. My people out there know it. Whatever's in that car would disappear, and that car might disappear also. Also, you need someone watching the cop car to make sure that no one drives the cop car away or someone puts something inside. And that's what I'm trying to explain to the public, is they don't understand the dynamics of an arrest. It's not one person. It's one incident. You need 2 cops at the intersection stopping the flow of vehicular traffic so that these cops in the street making this arrest do not get ran over. We need 2 cops on the sidewalk controlling pedestrian traffic. We need 1 cop to watch what's above us so something's not coming down. 2 cops behind to watch the vehicular traffic on the other side. 2 cops on the other sidewalk across the street. 2 cops watching the car. 2 cops watching the captain's car. And you know what? If we could get more to respond, we'll take them. Because you even need more people to help control while they're making the arrest. You also need cops to make sure that there's a flow of traffic when you call an ambulance to come for the perpetrator, and to make sure that there is egress. So again, this is one incident, not one perpetrator.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also want to get them the hell out of there quick too, because I don't want a huge crowd to form and make it a big scene on New York City streets that day. All the reporters showing up, everybody. So I'm going to try to bring that scene to a close real quick and get them the hell out of there into the hospital to get treated. Because the more time goes on too, the larger the crowd gets, the more cops you're going to need, the crazier the situation is going to get. And that's another thing in New York City. Like, we try to wrap it up real quick because that's going to happen. And people, and who's going to see him? Yo, that's my boy. That's my neighbor. That's it. And then forget about it. And then you're fighting with someone else, and then other people are getting arrested. It just turns into a melee, So that's another thing, that we deal with in New York City. That, if you don't work in a metropolis, that you wouldn't really have to deal with. But that's the reality. I mean, the reality is that there's never enough cops, right? There's never enough cops. You could always use more. And yeah, I mean, that was a crazy situation. I thought the captain handled it the best way he could. And to the critics, I think it's laughable, man. I really do. Cause I hear a lot of crying about crime in New York City. And I hear it a lot from progressives. I hear it a lot. Oh, the trains aren't safe. This isn't safe. The streets aren't safe. But the minute a cop writes somebody a summons, the minute somebody's going to get arrested, oh, those cops are terrible. It's like, what do you want? Do you want cops or do you not want cops? Do you want crime to go down? How do you bring crime down without policing crime, without holding people accountable, without issuing summonses for minor crimes, without arresting people for minor crimes or major crimes? And again, I haven't heard it. I was on Tremel Thompson's show last week. I mean, it was a good show, Progressive Action TV. I did it with Edwin Raymond. For those of you that hadn't heard, and again, I still haven't heard another theory other than broken windows. And I'm looking forward to hearing Eric on that show as well, because I know Eric's a proponent of utilizing minor crime and broken windows. And one thing that you don't really hear, like, but you hear a lot in the public, stop, question, frisk, but you don't hear a lot about that on the show, where we're like, oh, you got to bring back stop, question, frisk. No, what we say is, you got to hold people accountable for their actions, and you got to police minor crimes, right? And we don't harp on the stop, question, and frisk, because we believe that if you're policing minor crimes, people are getting stopped for the crimes they commit. You will deter the larger crimes. You will solve the larger crimes. You will create an omnipresence in New York City, and we still haven't heard it. So I'm looking forward to actually someone coming up with a plan other than that.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. That's why I love broken windows theory, but I like to refer to it as intrusive police work. And the reason why I say that, because it's not just addressing minor crimes, and it's not just stop, question, frisk. I call it intrusive police work because that's the dichotomy between a cop with the iconic shield in comparison to a security guard. Security guard observes, reports, repeats. We should want our police officers engaged in the public. That's what intrusive police work is. There's four tiers or levels to intrusion that police officers can do to encounter the public. There is stop, question, frisk, which is level 3. But what people don't talk about is the level 1 and 2 that the city council has just made even more of an obstacle with their How Many Stops Act. But the level 1 is somewhere where all cops engage people on a daily basis, whether you're doing community policing or your anti-crime or your patrol. And that's an objective reason to approach people. That's what cops do. You see someone at the intersection, they appear to be lost. Cops approach them and say, hey, how you doing, buddy? Are you lost? Now, is that addressing a minor crime? Is that a stop, question, and frisk? No, but that's intrusive police work. That's being intrusive. The person could legitimately be lost. Yeah, no problem. I'm lost. I have no idea where I'm going. And now you help that person to where they can get to their location. You've just bonded with the community. That's a great interaction. Or that person is lost because they're about to commit a robbery and they don't know where they are, or they're nervous and sweating, and the level of the tiers move up, and you get to that stop, question, frisk, which leads to an arrest. So that's why I say, if I was police commissioner tomorrow, I would tell the public we're doing intrusive police work, and I would explain it, and I would actually do in-house training, precinct to precinct, and I would have mentors teaching this on a constant basis. We would have the most savvy and intelligent cops, and then the cases would have to be drawn up in court, because the cops would be knowledgeable, and this would be completely evidence-based, and it would be based on Supreme Court case law.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the plan's great, and I think that you do that, but the politics in New York are bad at this point. I think I read an article the other day that 78% of all the arrests get thrown out. 78%. And I think that was only felonies. So that means misdemeanors aren't getting drawn up. Misdemeanors are going nowhere. You commit a misdemeanor crime, it doesn't matter. You're getting arrested, so what? Case is getting dropped down the road. You're not going to ever receive a penalty for committing a misdemeanor. So we're creating like this lawless society. But the only way to really push back from a police standpoint is exactly what you said, Eric. Intrusive police work. I mean, but the criminal, one thing, listen, we knocked the upper echelon a lot. I know that the last episode we just put out, what was that episode? That was
Grow Up.
Yeah, we actually stole with permission. I contacted Mike Colon. I asked him if it's okay if we could use the title of his article, which was Memo to NYPD Brass, Grow Up, because they attacked a strong advocate and supporter from New York City Police Department and the New York City Fire Department, and constantly has a ton of cops on his show. And John Shell went at him, with showed like real paranoia, thinking that myself and Eric put him up to writing this article when he was really just giving an opinion. Mike's a great guy. but we don't tell Mike what to write. We don't tell him what shows to do. We don't really speak to him much. Yeah, Eric was on the show once. He has a great show, and it basically is interviews of retired guys, and they walk them through their career, different units, what they did in that unit, old like true crime stories. So it's a great show. If any is that, it's called Mike in New Haven. But John Shell attacked him. Totally went after him in the state of paranoia about an opinion piece that he wrote. And I just, so as much as we knock them, as much as we say that they're incompetent, and I do believe that they should all be removed. I do. There's one thing that I do agree with them with is the rank and file of the New York City Police Department are doing their job. There are tons of arrests being made. Arrests are being made at record levels. I always say don't brag about it because it's a failure in public safety. But it's not a failure in public safety on their leadership or on the part of the New York City Police Department's rank and file. It's a failure in leadership on the part of our elected officials to create common sense legislation instead of this pro-criminal legislation that they put in. And then it's a failure on the district attorneys to properly charge people. And they complain too about the legislation, which is that discovery law, right? So then again, that goes back to the elected officials. And then after that, it's the judges. It's these woke judges that are sending people out. So I agree with them. It's not just them in the game. It's not, the police department is doing their job. The upper echelon, that's a different story.
Well said. Hands down, that was fantastic. You said, I agree. And we hear from the upper echelon refer to the other people involved in this as stakeholders. Yes, there are other stakeholders in public safety. It's the NYPD. It's the judges, it's the elected officials, it's the politicians, it's the DAs, it's the school system, it's parents. Everyone's a stakeholder when it comes to public safety. But I think that is a complete deflection from what's going on with the NYPD leadership. And I think that I'm glad that you cleared that up. We support the rank and file. For the overwhelming majority of the rank and file is going out there doing their job as they're told and expected from the residents of New York City, while they're handcuffed by the politicians, by the elected officials, by the DAs, handicapped by the CCRB, obstacles created by the New York City Council, under the gun for a potential civil liability, under the gun for potential indictment and arrest by the DAs, especially Alvin Bragg. They're out there doing their job. They have more firearm arrests now than ever. Why? Because they're going out there doing their job, and there's more guns out there. And that's why, we've had little tiffs with some cops, particularly in the tan pants, and they were arguing that they do more than we did. That's not the case. They're addressing the problems that are in front of them. We addressed the problems we had. There are far more guns out there right now. Also, those that actually possess the firearms are all from all different walks of life. They're not just perpetrators, but they're also persons of interest that are actually just scared of what's going on in New York City. So yes, I support the rank and file. They're out there doing their job under the gun in this situation. Again, I always say it for those that are out there doing this job. I commend you. My hat is off to you. So ultimately, if we had to grade, let's say right now we had to grade this captain on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, what score would you give him on his ability to handle this situation and how he handled himself as a cop?
I don't really like the question, I'll be honest with you, because I don't know the entire encounter. But I'll grade it based just upon what I saw. And my grade is going to be biased because, again, I'm going to say that I believe that something happened that led him to rush up on that car with his gun out. I believe, I believe that he was waiting for backup. I do. So I'm going to be biased, and I'm going to give him I don't know that I give anybody a 10 in any scenario. So, and that's just not, and that's including myself, because there's always things that could have been done differently and stuff like that. So, but I definitely say he's an 8 or higher. He's not, 100, I don't know the entirety of the situation, but from what I've seen from that standpoint, I don't see anything that I think could have really been done differently at that point. he really had no choice. So you know what? My 8's not even fair because I wouldn't have done anything. I don't even see anything differently. I say a 10.
Well, I'm glad they answered the question because that's how I figured you would answer it anyway. And that's the same thing. There's context missing, and we can only go by what we see. And the reason why I asked you that is because we have people that are viewing, they're making their assessment without having the context. That's why it's so important that we have the context. So with that being said, do you think that the mayor or the police commissioner should come out and make a public statement about this particular arrest?
I absolutely 100% think that the police commissioner should come out and make a statement about this arrest. I think that any of these things that go viral in the news and the community starts to speak out about them, and community advocates on both sides, those on common sense and those on the side of anti-police, I think that it's imperative on the New York City Police Department to put a proper message out there. And they don't do that. All we're seeing is that they want to control the narrative. John Schell did a couple of news shows recently, and all he talked about was the narrative. And we're going to compete for the narrative. We're going to control the narrative, and we're going to do it against these dishonest entities. And, you know, when he says that, you know, obviously he's talking about Eric and myself as well in this podcast. And I'm just going to say right now, what have we been dishonest about? We give our opinion. It's our honest opinion. You know, if anyone's been dishonest, it's been the New York City Police Department. To New York City, they failed. And again, it's the upper echelon. They failed to actually have this conversation that we're having right now, Eric. They failed for years and years, way before this administration, to have this conversation with the public. They're still failing today. Now they're attempting to bully the media. And they also failed on being honest with New York City residents about the crime statistics in order to tell them that it's just their perception. Crime's not really up, when in fact, they lied, and it is. So funny that you're talking about integrity, funny that you're talking about dishonest entities, because the only dishonest entity I see is you guys.
Well, I think that's fantastic what you're saying. Absolutely. There should be a statement immediately. It should be transparent. There should be a statement without even having the context. It should tell the public exactly what we're saying, that we're missing context. An investigation has not been conducted, but based on the information that we have, this is what we have determined. This is the outcome. This is why the police officer takes the actions. Just as we do, we break it down for the public so that they actually get an understanding. People don't like to be in the dark. People like to be informed. When you keep people informed, that breaks barriers. But what does the police department do? They keep people in the dark. And that's where they create this environment where they give the appearance of impropriety because they're not being transparent with the public. There should be an immediate statement, and that puts things at ease. And the fact that they don't put a statement out, that's where I get confused, and I don't understand why they back off on putting statements right away. Is it a lack of knowledge? Is it incompetence? That's a good question, because there should be a statement immediately. Especially in this particular case, there's no body camera footage because he's not on duty. Another reason to actually come out with a statement. Also, what are we missing in this particular scene? Journalism. There's no reporters. There's nobody there from Channel 7 because of the encryption of radios. What is your take on that?
So there's a bill up right now that, and I don't believe the police department supports this bill because they have nothing. When we saw that city council meeting, they didn't have a plan to give reporters radios. So the bill I believe it's in front of the state assembly right now. I could be wrong because I think there's two bills. I think there's one in front of the state assembly, and I think there's another one in front of city council. So that bill, the bill that I'm talking about in particular, 10-minute delay. 10-minute delay for reporters, credentialed reporters. They would have access to listen, not transmit, which they always did, right? That's it's not against the law to have a radio that does not transmit to listen to. So they would get access to this encrypted channel so that they could be there for transparency. I personally support it. I think that solves both problems. I think that if a 10-minute, I know that the reporters won't like it. I need to know at a moment's notice. But I think 10 minutes is fair, right? You give the cops time to assess the scene, and we could get away from the bad actor, and then you could actually get there and report the facts of what's going on.
I actually like that. I think that's completely fair because I think that 10 or 15 minutes is completely fair because I've been in situations where I'm actually have a live case. I'm handling an arrest situation, or we're actually trying to preserve evidence at a shooting, and immediately the press is there trying to obtain information. Sometimes, I'm not knocking them, but sometimes they would actually intercept and compromise a scene, and I would actually have to find a location for them that they could actually start to record and in somewhere where it's not impeding on the investigation. So I think that's a good balance that there's 10 to 15 minutes. I think that's a great point, the way you put it out there, to give the police time to actually settle a scene. So that's a great point. I know I fired some questions, and I want to fire one more because I think these are important that we go over. Do you believe there's going to be a CCRB initiation investigation? And if so, what do you think the allegations will be?
There already is a CCRB investigation. I don't know that for a fact, but just I'm saying 1000% there's already a CCRB investigation. It's going to be unlawful stop. It's going to be fatal use of force. It's going to be multiple charges of fatal use of force for, excessive force, for striking him with the firearm, for the kicks, for the stop, for when the takedown. There will be multiple part when he pulls him back by his belt or his pants. They're going to charge that as well. So I think an abuse of authority for the stop, unlawful stop. There's a slew of charges. Again, no body camera because I don't think it says anywhere that captains don't have to wear it. I think there's going to be a lot of charges on there, but I think those are the main ones. Multiple abuses of authority coupled with multiple uses of force charges from the CCRB. And they will, again, not look at the captain's viewpoint because, as Oliver Rice has said, she's only concerned with what the complainant has to say, not the totality of the circumstances. And I think that alone should have had her removed from that position if the mayor was truly cared, but he obviously doesn't. So,
well, I do think that there's going to be also an allegation or an investigation into racial profiling and bias when it comes to this particular stuff. So, with that being said, I don't know if you have it, but do you have that clip that we could play it again so the public understands that the totality of circumstances involving the police officer's mindset is not a factor?
Oh, I don't have.
Do you have her? Okay. Well, you know what? Please, like I said, to our viewers out there, if you're in favor and you're agreeing with our perspective of the actions of this cop and the elements that we talk about not working alone, please leave your comments. Give us your perspective. If you're a cop in New York City or another city out there, well, give us your perspective. And if you are a cop in another state and you watch this and you work alone, tell us what it feels like to work alone. If you agree with some of these, even in a rural area, I think it's even then you shouldn't work alone. But if you're in opposition to what we're saying and you think that the cop acted inappropriately, leave your comments. I think it's important, even if you don't agree, it's important that we have these conversations and we need perspective at all angles and keep this conversation going. It's the only way that we grow. At some point, we have to show each other respect and we have to appreciate each other's opinions. And we also have to be honest. If the opinions are debunked with factual data, then we have to be honest and say, okay, I could see that point of view. And that really shows that there's no bias. That's the part that I have a problem when it comes to people that are on other side of things, and they're not willing to say, okay, I could see that. And that's not an honest opinion. That's where the bias comes in.
Yeah, and I still haven't heard how we investigate, because you're right, I forgot the profiling, bias-based policing, that he's going to get charged with profiling. Only solely because he appears to be a male white officer who's stopping a male black. I do believe that charge will be used against male whites specifically. I think you'll see a huge difference in the number of times that is charged against a male white officer as opposed to any officer of any other race. I believe that that charge is biased towards male whites in the New York City Police Department. But how do you prove profiling? The New York City Police Department couldn't do it. I think they they substantiated 3 cases out of like 3,000 or something. And I would even say that they probably didn't even get I wouldn't even say that they really did substantiate it, because I don't believe that you could substantiate it. But I'm curious to see what are the investigative steps that CCRB is going to take for any of these profiling allegations, and they have yet to answer. I've asked them the question numerous times, and I've never been given an answer. What are the investigative steps taken to prove profiling? And I would really like anybody to really let us know, how do you prove profiling? If you think that profiling's good, if you think profiling's good to track that allegation, why is it good, and how do you prove it? And I want you to just put yourself in that situation, because the same measure that you choose for anyone else, you are also held accountable as well. So I want you to put yourself in that situation and deem you, is this a fair way to prove bias? I personally don't believe it could be proven.
Hands down, I agree with you. I think that racial profiling bias investigations are based completely on emotion and feeling, and there's absolutely no way to disprove these cases. Again, it could be used for data to maybe make observations and reforms, if that's what you're looking at. But to actually make an assessment, I think it's completely impossible, unless someone just comes out and says, I stopped this person because they're black, which you'll never hear, and there's no other factors. It's virtually impossible. So with that being said, I think we really covered the elements of not working alone, the factors in this particular arrest. So we've included CCRB, we've included the diaphragm law, we've actually included why you would need more cops, and it's never enough, because it's not one person, it's one entire incident, especially a metropolis like this, because policing is not one size fits all. The dynamic in Brooklyn, in this particular spot, even in the same city, may be different in Manhattan, or it may be different in I know I worked in housing, and housing is very unique, because in most places you work, it's transient. But in housing, if you're actually in a particular development, you're working in someone's home. So that's completely different. And that's why also in housing, we would get large crowds immediately, because you're working in people's homes, and people live there, and they know each other. They're very accessible to each other, and you would get crowds quickly. So I just want to reflect on that point that you made. Getting in and getting out quickly is probably one of the most important things tactically in New York City, especially in the NYPD. Is there anything you think we should discuss that we might have missed?
No, I think it's good. I think we broke down, this video, and just, as always, anybody that has a different thought, if you'd like to come on the show and discuss it, we'd love to have you. Tramel, Edwin, love to hear your comments, especially. So we'd love to have you guys on. We could break down this incident. I definitely want to break down racial profiling and policing and see how that's proven and what measures they would like to use to track, to see if officers, in fact, racially profile.
Absolutely. I think it's actually twofold, right? That where we see feelings and emotions. The feeling it's investigated based on a feeling by the CCRB, and the complaint is also initiated by a feeling by the complainant. So it's all based on feeling. I think that it's really a rabbit hole we should be going down. And I up to this point, I don't know of any data of anyone actually getting substantially charged for the CCRB with racial profiling. Before we close, do you know of any cases?
I think John said, when I asked him the question, I think that was what he regurgitated, is that they fully investigated whatever it was. And I think he did say he substantiated. I'm not mistaken. He answered with the statistics. He didn't answer my question where I said, what are the investigative steps taken? And he just answered with the substantiation.
I remember that too. Yeah, it kind of deflected it. So,
yeah.
Well, that's outstanding. I mean, listen, I think at this point, I think you heard it here. Again, I don't think any cop should work alone. I know at some point, Mayor Eric Adams during his tenure now, I think it was about a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year ago, where cops in transit were actually assigned to work solo. And I think that lasted a day, if I'm not wrong. Maybe one day.
Fucking idiot.
That lasted one day, right? Did a cop get assaulted in the train?
One day, and a cop got
One
thrown
day.
down the stairs. And he was a big guy, and thank God he was big, or else it would have been bad. He was a big guy. One day. Cops
Yes.
could work alone. Don't worry about it.
You know, it's interesting. So I talked to some people, and I will say this before I close. And they said, well, I've been out there, you know, by myself, not really but maybe with another cop. And they had 20 people stopped, and they wrote 20 summonses and addressed the situation with just 2 cops. Now, I would say this. The only reason that we were able to do that, and let's be honest, I don't care who you are. If me and John, as 2 cops with guns on us, stopped 20 people, if those 20 people really wanted to swarm and take our guns, they could. I don't care how much training, how much strong you are. What's that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, they could take it. But the reason why cops were able to do that is because we had support. And we had support from outside the department, from DAs, judges, elected officials, politicians. But what did we also have? We had support from within. You knew at a second's notice, if you called for backup, that everyone was coming and everyone was prepared and willing to help you and ready. And the adversaries, they knew that too. But now it's a completely different dynamic. I don't suggest any 2 cops stop a group of 20 at this point and think you're going to get the same outcome. The reason why we felt comfortable doing that is because, not because we thought we were so big and bad, because we knew that backup was ready. And we also knew that the perpetrators knew if we got on that radio, we had reinforcement. So that's the different dynamic. So and that just shows that support is so important to keep you strong. Support in your own body, support in your mind, and support in the police department. So before we close, you want to give any last words?
Just on Eric Adams, how he's such a great mayor. Because I now that you just said that, like what he said about the transit should work by themselves, and it lasted one day. I just want to say I don't know how this upper echelon works for this man. I mean, he's completely anti-police. He's supported every single piece of anti-police pro-criminal legislation. Everything. Even the bill he vetoed, he supported. That he attempted to veto that went through. He still said he supported it. And John Schell and Mike Kemper, they all regurgitated the same thing, and Kaz Daughtry. So I don't know how they're so politically confused right now. It's not even funny. They're pretending to be Donald Trump out there on social media, but they work for a progressive mayor who doesn't like cops. They're rubbing elbows with Al Sharpton. I mean, this administration does not know what they're doing. And, the whole perception campaign, the whole thing that we're pushing back on misinformation. If a reporter writes a story wrong, yes, absolutely you should push back. Do it as a professional. But like them going out on social media, it's a huge embarrassment. It just shows exactly how childish Eric Adams is and how incompetent his appointments are. I mean, these guys, if they were running a Dunkin' Donuts, man, it would be ran into the ground. And I could talk about this all day long because it's just so hard to watch. Because even though we just did an episode on it, they just keep going. There's more and more tweets. I'm not going to talk about any of them, but I just wanted to say Eric Adams does not support cops. This upper echelon supports Eric Adams. Therefore, they do not support cops.
Hands down, absolutely. I think we covered everything, but I want to leave. Before we leave, I just want, again, I care about the cops. I care about the rank and file. I care about the cops of the entire country. When you're on duty and you're carrying a firearm, have the most appropriate holster. Have the holster that's comfortable for you. But I mean it when I said it earlier. Unload your weapon. Take out your ammunition, but actually practice at home. I know it sounds kind of funny. Get in front of the mirror. Take out your gun. Imagine you point at somebody. Imagine putting it back. It should be in the same spot every time, putting it back. And listen, we don't get paid for this, but we meet. There's a buddy of ours, Big Dick Ballistics. He's all over YouTube. He's a guy that knows about holsters. He's really into firearms. He's a firearms instructor himself. Check out his YouTube channel. He talks about holsters. He always, it's very important to him that cops off duty are armed. You should be armed. Obviously, if you're at the gym or something like that, you can't carry it. But if you are armed, and you should be, practice. Putting that in your waistband or wherever you put that holster. That's your choice. But make sure you practice where to put it so that it becomes part of your neural pathway, and it's not surprising. And for that, men and women out there, you be safe. We support you. We support you in life, not in death. All right? Thank you very much for what you guys do out there. John McCarry, thank you for being the co-host of this podcast and the founder of this. Everything that you do and stand on moral principle. Check out a couple of clips that just came out from Newsmax where John was hosted on it. John did a great job having a conversation, displayed extreme professionalism with Tramell Thompson and Edwin Raymond. I thought he was completely stoic, and he really stood his ground. Please check it out. New York's Finest, Retired and Unfiltered Podcast. Be back at you. Thank you.
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.